Those are all tough acts to follow. This is our last and final speaker today, and I'd like to welcome our next guest. Tim O'Neill is the president and CEO of Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona. Tim has led Goodwill's growth in Arizona for nearly 25 years. With a team of 6,000 staff and an annual budget approaching $350 million, he brings vision, innovation, and tireless commitment to making our communities stronger and more sustainable through Goodwill's retail operations and human services programs. Please welcome Tim O'Neill.
Good morning. So first, to all of Goodwill's and Thrive's board of directors, would you raise your hands, please? And the Goodwill or Thrive teams, raise your hands. I just want to say thank you. And before I get into thanking the partners, two people in the room need very special recognition. A gentleman that made this happen for us, Cesar Verduzco. Say hello. Cesar's a great friend, and we were sitting having lunch one day when he'd been on a tour. So when you see this facility here, what we call our ROC, our Retail Operations Center, this is the smallest building. The one right across the street is about probably 15 times the size of this, and I'll explain why we have this facility in just a bit. But we're sitting at lunch. Cesar had a chance to tour, and he said, "Oh my gosh, you need to talk to Alicia at ASU." And he made a phone call, and that phone call, I think the next day, within a short period of time, we were having a meeting talking about this property and this being the first plastic microfactory in the world. So thank you very much for that. And then Beth Forsberg. Where's Beth? She's tiny. So Beth is Goodwill's Senior Vice President of Sustainability, and all things recycling run through her. And it's her work, along with our great partners, that have made this happen. So to just thank in a row ASU, what a great group of people. Raj mentioned Reimagine Phoenix, and Goodwill was one of those partners, I think 11 years ago, and proud of it, very proud of it. And this idea that it came to this whole full circle of creating something brand new that's world changing out of Arizona is very meaningful to Goodwill, very meaningful to me. So ASU, City of Phoenix, Hustle Phoenix, just thank you for all the work that you've done, because I get to sit behind the scenes and hear all the great things that are happening while this team is the one that goes out and makes it really work. So to all of you, thank you very much. When you think about Goodwill, maybe you wonder why. Why is Goodwill a part of this? And so as you drove in today, you saw this facility that's about 400,000 square feet. You saw all those trailers, hundreds of trailers. What you don't see inside is a trash hauling company that's owned by Goodwill. You don't see that Goodwill receives 1 million items a day throughout Arizona, and we have so much more to do. When you think about recycling and the idea of thrift and the reuse of products, it wasn't always sexy. Alicia said 25 years with Goodwill, that's true. 25 years in about 3 weeks with Goodwill. But I've been doing this since I was 18 years old, so that's a lot more than 25 years. And I've seen it transform. If you think about what happens today, you heard the number that only about 14% of plastics are recycled. That goes through the entire solid waste stream. Clothing today, only 15% of it ever makes it into a reuse facility. 85% still goes in landfill. We have to do a better job of this, and this is the start to it. This facility at some point would like to house the plastics recycling, we'd like to see textile recycling, we'd like to see a circular idea around aluminums, and we'd like for Goodwill to be the place where you bring it all to us. And sitting with Alicia and talking to her, the idea, she said, we need you, not for the facility, but when you get 1 million items a day donated, there's lots of feedstock to make something like this work, and that's the process of it. I was at a solid waste convention about probably 10 years ago, and I was speaking to the group, and the question was, why is Goodwill here? And so I asked, and these are large waste haulers, large recycling facilities from all over the United States. And I asked, how long have you been in business? And I said, raise your hand for 20 years, and most of the group raised their hands. And then 40 years, and a few less hands went up. And I got to like 80 years, and nobody's hand went up. Goodwill's been recycling for 122 years. We are the original recycler. We are the place that has innovated in ways that people don't think of innovation. And we do it all to help this community. So what you see behind us, this isn't just a way to help the environment. This is a way to give people jobs. This is a way to educate people on a brand new up-and-coming skill set. This is a way to generate revenue. And you heard Alicia mention that we're approaching $315 million. That makes us one of the largest not-for-profits in the world right here in Phoenix. We only generate that revenue to serve people. So what that means is when you bring your donations in, when you support a recycling center like this, you allow us to provide, last year, 500,000 free services to the people of Arizona. You did that by cleaning out your closets. But as I said, there's so much work to be done. When you think about recycling and the numbers I gave you about what actually still hits the landfill, it's a bigger issue than that. It's going to become a much bigger issue than that. Because there was just a Harvard Business Review article that said the average American has 4,517 pounds of reusable goods in their household. That equals out to something like 579 billion pounds of stuff that's going to hit this stream. It's either going to hit through thrift stores, it's going to hit through recycling facilities, it's going to move overseas, or it's going to hit landfill. What we need to do is figure out how to reuse those products. Now, that's not going to be popular. You're not going to have cotton companies, you're not going to have oil companies where these garments and things like that come from that don't like their idea of their inventories being hurt, but to save the environment, it's what we have to do. Think about that number, 579 billion pounds of goods that will hit this stream at some point in the next 20 years. And if we don't do things like this, if we're not the ones that take the lead on something like this, then all we have to look forward to is that going in the oceans, the landfills, and the ideas of chemical in our ground. It's true, it's real. And just be proud that you're a group that is innovative, that we live in a state where you have a great political system, whether you want to believe it or not. We are here and we think about these things. The people of this state, the politicians of this state from every level, they care, and they care about this beautiful landscape that we have. So thank you very much for being here. We are going to give you a tour shortly, and I just wanted to say one more time to our partners, Hustle Phoenix, ASU, City of Phoenix, just very well done. Thank you.
So this ends the first part of the program. I want to thank everybody for coming out and joining us. And the next portion, we are going to dive into a ribbon cutting and a full-blown tour where you'll be able to ask lots of questions and actually walk through the entire process. Before we do that, if everyone could look at the wall behind you. Do you see those stacks of plastic totes? Probably about 100 feet long, and they're probably another 20, 30 feet wide. Those are all plastic feedstock that Goodwill has been collecting for the microfactory. How long do you think it took to collect that amount of material? Someone said 1 year. 1 day. 4 weeks. But we had to actually stop collecting. And so we're preparing to start production. So frame of reference, as you dive into the tour on the other side, we've got feedstock already stacked. We have a container of Super Bowl signs, also in a container from last year, ready to process. And so I'd like to welcome our colleagues for the ribbon cutting portion of this. Mayor Kate Gallego, Councilwoman Ansari, Tim O'Neill, and Chris Waddell, please come up to the podium.
Welcome to the Fun Phoenix Budget Tool. With just the click of a mouse, you can let us know how you want Phoenix's budget to be spent. Phoenix's general fund budget powers everything from libraries and parks to public safety and senior centers, even public works and streets. Our overall budget reflects what is important to our residents and Phoenix City Council. Dive into the details of how and where the money is spent and make your recommendations by adding funding to the areas that you think need more money and take away from others. The only rule is that what is spent must equal to the money coming in. The budget must be balanced. The City Council and City Manager will get regular updates on ideas from residents and make them part of the feedback for developing next year's budget. So what's important to you? Visit Phoenix.gov/fundphx and take Fund Phoenix for a spin, sharing your budget ideas with us.
Bienvenido a la herramienta del presupuesto Fund Phoenix. Con solo hacer clic en el ratón de su computadora, usted puede decirnos cómo desea que se gaste el presupuesto de Phoenix. El presupuesto del Fondo General de Phoenix apoya todo, desde bibliotecas y parques, seguridad pública, centros para personas de la tercera edad, hasta obras públicas y calles. Nuestro presupuesto general refleja lo que es importante para los residentes y el Consejo Municipal. Mire los detalles de cómo y dónde se gasta el dinero y haga sus recomendaciones añadiendo fondos a las áreas que usted crea necesitan más y quitándoles a otras. La única regla es que los gastos deben de ser igual a los ingresos. Al final, el presupuesto debe estar equilibrado. El Consejo y Administrador Municipal recibirán actualizaciones periódicamente sobre las ideas de los residentes y las incluirán en las recomendaciones para desarrollar el presupuesto del próximo año. ¿Qué es importante para usted? Visite Phoenix.gov/Fund Phoenix, experimente con la herramienta Fund Phoenix y comparta con nosotros sus ideas sobre el presupuesto.
One of the first newspapers in the state published by African Americans was the Phoenix Tribune. It was started during World War I. It had support from the Arizona Republican, the antecedent to the Arizona Republic, the largest newspaper in Arizona. This paper covered the depth of African American life in the United States at the time. Arthur Randolph Smith edited this particular newspaper. He focused on local luminaries, and in doing so, what he showed was the breadth that civic leaders in the Valley had. The Phoenix Tribune is followed by the Arizona Gleam. It was published during the Great Depression by Abra Hackett. She was the wife of Winston C. Hackett, one of the first black physicians in the state. In contrast with the Phoenix Tribune, Hackett's newspaper, The Gleam, focused on church life and social activities. And in doing so, she really shows the depth of cultural life in Black Phoenix at the time. During the 1970s, there's the Arizona Black Dispatch, a newspaper started by state legislator Horace Eddie Owens. He eventually sells this paper to Marion J. Bacotes. She's an Air Force veteran and ASU student at the time, and she winds up being the second black woman to run a newspaper in the Valley. From the Phoenix Tribune to the Arizona Sun to the Arizona Informant to Phoenix Soul and other digital outlets today, black journalists are still telling the stories that allow black Phoenicians to know the history and the legacy of their community.
We all want to get to our destination safely, so be aware of everything happening around you whenever walking, riding, or rolling along our streets. Most pedestrian and bike crashes happen when drivers are turning. Scan the street for wheels and feet when turning or entering intersections.
This location started out as a one-room family school, one of the first schools in the whole valley. It was started by a pioneer family called the Osborne family. And it was actually Sidney Osborne, one of the sons of the family, became governor of Arizona in the 1940s. For 140 years, this building was a church, several different denominations, but it started out in 1914 as the Bethel United Methodist Church. And as Phoenix continued to grow all around it, the need for larger buildings came along with that growth. So in 1948, they built this larger building. Starting in 2012, the new owners worked very, very closely with the city to transform the building rather than demolishing it. And through a process called adaptive reuse, the city and the owners were able to transform this gorgeous building into a successful small business called the Taco Guild.
I want to thank everybody for coming here this morning to celebrate this monumentous event. I would like to, in addition to our speakers, acknowledge some of our guests that have joined us today. We have in attendance Director Karen Peters from Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. We also have Edward Chu, who's on leave for sabbatical with us at ASU and will return back to his post as Director of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for Region 7. Chris Mackey, Director of Community Economic Development, City of Phoenix. Felipe Moreno, Director of Public Works at City of Phoenix. Sherry Collins, Director of Solid Waste, City of Mesa.
Good morning and welcome to the Transportation Infrastructure and Planning Subcommittee for February 21st, 2024. I'm calling the meeting to order and I will turn to the City Attorney so he can explain public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items to be discussed. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the subcommittee. General comments that go beyond the scope of the agenda item must be made in the citizen comment session at the end of the agenda. The City Council and Subcommittee and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters relating to pending investigations, claims, or litigation. Additionally, any member of the public who appears before the subcommittee in their capacity as a lobbyist must, as required by Phoenix City Code, disclose this fact before addressing the subcommittee. The City Code requires speakers to present their comments in a respectful and courteous manner. Profane language, threats, or personal attacks on members of the public, the subcommittee, or staff are not allowed. A person who violates these rules will lose their opportunity to continue to speak.
Thank you. And now I turn to the interpreter. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, my name is Elsie Duarte. I will be servicing as Spanish interpreter for today's Transportation Infrastructure and Planning Subcommittee session. I will now take a moment to introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience and will review some guidelines. Buenos días, bienvenidos a la sesión de la Subcomisión de Transportación, Infraestructura y Planificación. Mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y estaré sirviéndoles hoy como intérprete a nuestra audiencia de habla hispana. Deseamos pedirles antemano, si va a dar un comentario público, por favor hable despacio, con claridad y evite tener distracciones de fondo. Finalmente, después de cada una o dos oraciones, para poder interpretarle lo que esté diciendo de la manera más completa posible. Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And now we'll turn to item 1, approval of minutes.
Move to approve.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. It carries unanimously. Next, we have 3 consent items, 2, 3, and 4. Do I have a motion?
To approve consent items 2, 3, and 4.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. The next items, 5 and 6 and 7, are information only. Jerry, I noticed you didn't put an agenda item down, but you said you support. I'm guessing are you here for item 5? No, okay. Sorry. Thank you. Any questions on? Yes, go ahead.
Item 5, I'm sorry, I didn't ask earlier. I think item 5 is the parks.
Parks.
Yeah.
5-year capital.
Yeah.
You have a question?
I have a question. Sorry. In the 5-year capital, is Steel Indian Park part of the 5-year capital?
Good morning, Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, and Councilwoman Pastor. It is, and I can pull that out briefly if you don't mind. There are improvements scheduled. I just need to look at what year out that would be. If I recall, it was close to $2 million.
And as you're getting that, the reason I'm asking is because some constituents are wanting to see a lot of reprogramming in Steel Indian Park, and we are now using that park in a different capacity that we did in the past. And events that were held at Margaret Hance Park are now being held at Steel Indian, and I want to be able then to go back to my constituents that want to see a lot of reprogramming of that area. In particular, I want to have a discussion about the middle building. I'm not sure what it's called.
Yes, the old dining hall, the one that's vacant still.
Yes, I want to look at the old dining hall or dining place, space, I don't know, and being able to activate that and being able to do something very similar as to what we did to the old fire station on Margaret Hance Park. And so that's why I'm asking these questions, because I got some emails on it.
Yes, Councilwoman Pastor. So in fiscal year 25-26, so not this very next fiscal year, but the following year, we have $2 million set aside for general Steel Indian School Park improvements. So that's something that we can look at to see how we could utilize it in that way.
Okay, perfect. That's what I'm asking for a particular constituent.
Thank you. Any other questions on our info? All right, then let's move to item 8, updated air service incentive plan. And Mario, if you could introduce.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Here to speak on item 8 is on the updated air service incentive plan is Air Services Director Chad Makovsky, along with his team, Roxanne Favors and Lexi Van Haren, to present the update and ask for action on this item. Chad, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee. Happy to turn the presentation immediately over to my colleagues so as not to waste any time. So Roxanne, I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Good morning, Vice Mayor Stark, members of the subcommittee. Joining me here is Lexi Van Haren. She is the Aviation's Air Service Development Manager. And we're here today to request the subcommittee's approval on a new air service incentive plan for Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. It is a long-standing industry practice for airports to offer incentives to airlines to promote new service at an airport, including both new airlines serving the airport as well as new destinations served. The FAA recently issued updated guidelines to airports on their air service incentive plans. Lexi has worked really closely with our attorneys to revise our air service plan to ensure it complies with the new guidelines. I'll turn it over to Lexi to share the new proposed plan.
Thank you, Roxanne. Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, thank you for having us here today. As we come off the heels of a very exciting announcement, I'd like to just take a moment to reflect on the massive economic impact that international air service provides for our community. In total, the last economic impact statement had $3.4 billion in economic impact coming from international air service alone each year. The new proposed Paris route is estimated to generate $30 million in economic impact for 3 times weekly for the first season. So massive economic impact. It's also important to note that the airport is self-sustaining, operating off of its own revenues, and supports 57,000 jobs in the community each year. But there are a lot of airports in the world, and it's important to remember that an aircraft is a movable asset that an airline can choose to put between any 2 points in the world in which it will be able to make the most profit. And this is a map right here of that competition, the fact that there are so many airports in the world that are vying for airlines and long-haul international service. This shows our base demand for our international locations. This is the number of passengers that travel in between Phoenix and these destinations each way. The blue ones we have service to, the gray ones we do not. And we have some major markets there. One of the ones to note would be Tokyo for Asia air service, as well as our European markets, Paris and Amsterdam. Paris, prior to the pandemic, was our largest unserved European market, with Amsterdam close behind. It's also important to note that for an airline, it's a massive investment for long-haul service. It's estimated that for a long-haul carrier to provide daily service from Phoenix to Asia, that they would need to, the break-even revenue would need to be more than $90 million. So it's a massive investment for an airline in order to start that service. Now, we had a incentive plan from 2020 to 2024, and that incentive plan was in compliance with the FAA's guidelines that they had first issued in 2010. They updated a released draft of those guidelines in February of 2023, and we worked with our peer large hub airports and industry associations to analyze these impacts, and we submitted comments to the FAA. The FAA released final guidelines December 7th of 2023, and those guidelines did approach or have guidance on what we were concerned about. So that was something that was addressed. Now, those final guidelines did say that all airports in the U.S. must revise their air service incentive plans and publish those for 30 days before signing additional contracts. Yes.
Councilwoman Pastor has a question.
Oh, yes, Councilwoman.
What were the guidelines that or what was I guess the comments that you submitted that you weren't in line with?
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor. Some of the comments that we submitted requested clarification on terminology, such as an unserved market versus an underserved market. Those were addressed, and the FAA provided clarification for that. The other concern that we had was with the marketing incentive program administration. The initial draft guideline changed the way that was administered, and it would have been costly and overly burdensome to follow it. And actually, our large peer large hub airports agreed, and both of those concerns were addressed in the final guidelines.
Okay, and I don't know who to ask this question to, because it's obviously an incentive. So they're trying to incentivize you guys or the airports to, I would say, FAA wanting to do certain things with the airports. In particular, and I don't know if I'm off base, but in particular, air traffic and traffic patterns. And so does this somehow come into play with this incentive guideline?
Vice Mayor and Councilmember Pastor, traffic patterns or the type of traffic do not come into play with the Air Service Incentive Program, but it is helpful because we're a grant and aid airport. The FAA does want to have prescriptive guidelines on how we administer funds that we give outside of our organization, and that's exactly what this program is designed to do.
Okay, I just want to make sure because dealing with FAA, and you know what I'm talking about, and moving airline patterns or traffic patterns, I guess. I can't remember the exact term it's called. I just always very cautious when the FAA is asking for a lot of feedback from us, and I don't want it to then ding us of the future because it's in writing. So that's my concern. So thank you.
Thank you. And so now that the FAA has released their new guidelines, and also our previous incentive plan was coming to an end. It was a good time to also reflect on what are our goals for an air service incentive plan. And it's really to help move the business case forward with the airline's decision makers, as well as support the success of the launch of a route. It's very important that a new long-haul service succeeds. And so looking at what we can and can't do as the airport, we can offer fee waivers as well as marketing reimbursement dollars. We can advise our economic and tourism partners. What we cannot do is pay the airline directly or collect money to support the route or anything that would unfairly treat the airlines. And so the 2024-2028 plan does follow the guidelines and is in compliance, as well as keeping the prorated structure that we had previously based on frequency, distance, and region, up to $5 million in an incentive. It's strategically written to attract targeted air service, and it includes fee waivers and marketing dollars over 2 years. This is a breakdown of the plan with the most available funds for the longest distances. The reasoning being is that the longer the service, the more costly it is for airlines to operate. And the fee waivers would include fees that are waived for up to 2 years as per FAA guidelines, as well as a new entrant incentive if that new entrant were to serve something that was already served. Otherwise, these are for unserved markets.
So, Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, I just want to point out with the funding for this incentive, it's all derived from revenues that we generate on the airport by our airport users. We're not using any subsidized funds from the citizens to incentivize in this plan.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about any FAA regulations around funds that are raised by the airport, and what a city's requirement or an airport's requirement is for use of those funds?
Vice Mayor and Councilmember O'Brien, that's a great question. So the airport is a self-sustaining enterprise fund department of the City of Phoenix, and the FAA, as a recipient of grant and aid funding, the FAA is very prescriptive about how we spend that money. We cannot, there are grant assurances that we sign with every grant we receive that identifies how we can spend any money that we generate at the airport. And generally, all money that's made at the airport needs to stay at the airport or be reinvested into the airport for the benefit of the community. So we can't necessarily spend money outside, nor do we really accept money from local taxpayers, aside from when those people go to the airport and use the services of the airport. If they pay for a service, we may collect a portion of that service fee to help us reinvest back into the airport. Those are the types of funds we're talking about. Did I answer your question?
Do you receive any general funds from the City of Phoenix?
I am not aware of any general fund revenues from the City of Phoenix being spent on the airport itself.
Okay, so if I'm understanding what you're saying is that the only monies the airport uses are monies that are paid by people who fly in and out of the airport, or who might go to the airport and have a wonderful breakfast, lunch, or dinner in one of those restaurants that you can get pre-security.
When you use the services of the airport and you pay for those services, a portion of that revenue comes to the airport to be reinvested into the airport for the benefit of the community. So yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much, Chad. Thank you, Mayor. I just promoted you. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lexi.
And so that we would like to request that the subcommittee recommend to the City Council approval of the new 2024-2028 Air Service Incentive Plan for Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport.
Right, thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Councilwoman?
Thank you, Chair. I just had a real quick question. Are there other airports in the region that provide a similar incentive program? And is our incentive program going to be competitive with those other airports? So it's a two-part.
Vice Mayor, Councilwoman, thank you very much for that question. That's an excellent question. And yes, our competitor airports do have incentive plans. In fact, airlines have come to expect incentive plans. And with the revision of this plan, not only does it also update and bring us into compliance, but it also helps us, it is competitive with our peer airports.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one speaker, Leslie Shepard.
Good morning. I really appreciated your guys' questions. I really was super appreciative. When I look at this, I don't see it at all like you see it. I mean, I'm sitting here seeing you guys come and ask them to do something, and you're saying, but we're paying for it. So if you're paying for it, you don't need to ask them to do anything. So I don't believe that you're actually really paying for it. And I believe that that's the projection that you're giving, but I do not believe that at all, or you would not be here. This right here, this globalist policy, the citizens of Phoenix are now on the hook for $5 million per contract to fly people nonstop internationally. I would wonder if anyone in this room, besides maybe people within this little arena, have actually even flown anywhere internationally. What I'm trying to say is we have a population that is not benefiting from this project. I know what population is, and it's the least % of people here that are supposed to be represented. And it says, how many people in Phoenix have flown nonstop internationally? Huh? Good question. This is inequitable. It benefits the wealthy globalist business owners and does not benefit the average Phoenician. The policy needs to die with World Economic globalist dumpster fireball. This, you say that, I hear people over here always, each time they come up here, and I appreciated your questions because your questions are identifying that there's something involved here, or they wouldn't be coming and asking you. And this does affect money, and it does affect our money. He says that it's made from the airport, where that's made from us as well. It cracks me up when people say, oh, it's just federal money, or it's just, that's our money. So I'm just asking you guys, until you can actually look this into more detail. Yeah, they answered the questions. They're going to give you the answers that will get you to pass this. But I'm asking you not to. That's a lot of money. Why am I saying this? Okay. I'm like a broken record, I know, but there needs to be porta potties around for these homeless people. And we're sitting here asking for $5 million for people who can fly nonstop internationally, and that it doesn't affect the majority of the population of the people you represent. So I'm asking you not to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Councilwoman O'Brien?
Our speaker brought up a point about why things come before us, Chairwoman. So if you could please tell us, staff, why you're coming to the council for approval, or why you're coming to this committee for a recommendation to go to the council.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, Council Member O'Brien. We are a department, even though we're a self-sustained enterprise fund department of the City of Phoenix, we are a department of the City of Phoenix. We are city employees. And we are entering into contracts with business partners, and any contracts that we enter into require council approval. And so this is a request to approve a program that would allow us to enter into these contracts with various airlines to provide this program.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Councilwoman Pastor?
Yes. What I like to say is that, and I'm very proud of it, that the airport is one of the largest economic ecosystems in the state. And because it's that, we're able then to attract different airlines and international airlines to come as one of our hubs and then go on to where they're going, or they stay in Phoenix and spend their money. The state loves the fact that we're a large economic engine. We pay the taxes that we need to pay to the state. We do the things that we need to do in order to move an ecosystem and able to provide also the dollars that are needed within our state and our city. So anything that we can do to enhance people going through our airport, spending money through our airport, is viable for the state, not only Phoenix, but the state. So I I think we need to understand the broader picture of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a good point. Maybe if you go back to slide 1, just to show the annual visitor spending. These are people coming here, correct?
Yes, that's correct. This is a estimate that's based on the visitor spend in Phoenix, as well as what the airline would spend on services. And so international visitors stay longer and they spend more and help contribute to the overall $38 billion economic impact the airport has on the state every year.
So these numbers speak to the point that the councilwoman was bringing up with regards to economic benefit.
I just had a brief comment and question. As the airport is located in my district, I am especially found very sensitive to the economic impact that it has. As mentioned, we have about 59,000 dependent jobs that come directly from the airport. So while I respect the speaker's comment, I think we have to be cognizant of those investments that are being made as well. And I think it might be helpful for law, or even maybe Chad, you can explain that as a self-sustained enterprise fund, if those funds can't just be allocated in any which way we choose. They do have parameters. Might be helpful, because I do understand. I am totally an advocate to ensuring for our unsheltered brothers and sisters, but I also want to make sure we're following the applicable rules that we are subject to. So it might be helpful to give that some background.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and Councilmember Hodge Washington. Yes, as I was referring to earlier, because of the user fees that go into the system, the FAA collects those monies and then distributes them out to airports to use for grants in order to support the airports. So we're kind of this self-contained ecosystem, if you will. So all revenues that come into the airport need to be spent at the airport for airport services. As much as we would like to support other services in the community, we are prohibited from doing that and would actually put our future grant opportunities at risk, as well as potentially have to pay penalties if we were to use those monies on other purposes.
Thank you for that clarification. I just want to go on the record and say I think this is a really important small investment when you consider the economic impact that it would actually have to the population that we serve. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
One further question, clarification. Yes. Does this in any way subsidize the international flights of the people who are flying back and forth?
Vice Mayor, Councilwoman O'Brien, does it subsidize as in the purchase of those tickets?
Right, this marketing program, does it in any way, shape, or form subsidize the cost of a ticket? If I were to, you recently announced a nonstop to Paris, which some people are just overjoyed about, so it's awesome. But if I were to buy a round trip ticket to Paris to fly nonstop, does this program that you have in front of us today subsidize in any way, shape, or form my cost of my ticket?
No, it does not. This program is about the airline and helping the airline establish its business here in Phoenix to bring tourists and business.
And Councilwoman O'Brien, one of the benefits of this program is that also in order to sustain the route, it allows us to market our community in other destinations. So we're going to use a portion of this money with the airline as a part of this discussion to market, for example, all the benefits of coming to Phoenix in faraway lands such as Paris, France. So it's another great benefit for our community.
Well, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I do echo all their comments with regards to the economic benefits of our airport. We certainly saw that during the Super Bowl. I think we're going to see it again when Final Four comes here. So you serve a very important purpose for the city, for the entire state. Any other comments? Then can I have a motion?
I move to approve item 8.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. Thank you. Our next agenda item is large water users ordinance change. Mario, if you can introduce our speakers.
Yes, Madam Chair. The item 9 is the ordinance change requested for large water users. Here to present are Troy Hayes, the Water Services Director, along with Alan Stevenson, Deputy City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Also have up here with us is Dr. Max Wilson, Deputy Director within the Water Services Department. And so, as Mario talked about, we are here to discuss the proposed large water user ordinance. This ordinance is something that continues to build on the stewardship of water by the city of Phoenix, which has a long history in this valley, dating back to the Hohokam societies who built canals to inhibit this valley on up to the 1980s, where the state of Arizona passed the Groundwater Management Act that became the first state to regulate groundwater and mandate water conservation measures at that large of a scale. And that was to facilitate growth and development and the things we wanted to see happen in the state. And that continues right on with a sustainable desert city development policy regarding water that the mayor and council adopted back in June of 2023. You'll recall as part of that policy, there were 3 components to it. The best management practices to be implemented via stipulations on zoning cases and work through, and then eventually becoming city code. Pause on annexations for annexed land that is outside the city's current water service area, as well as this proposed large water user ordinance that we are here to present on today. And so I'm happy to report that the BMP practice is ongoing. The annexations have been implemented as well. And of course, we're here to talk about the large water user. So I'll turn that over to Troy from here, and then we'll be happy to answer questions at the end.
Thanks, Alan. Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, approximately 40% of our water comes from the Colorado River systems, 58% from the Salton Verde River system, and that leaving about 2% for groundwater. That represents the portion of our water that's delivered to our customers and not necessarily our water portfolios. We've shown this graphic many times in our discussions about water, and this shows how our customers' water use has gone down over 30% over the last 30 years. And they have embraced water conservation initiatives, lifestyle changes to drop their residential water use, and thus decreasing our average water usage. Since 1996, our average water production has remained relatively constant while our population has increased. However, we've briefed this committee numerous times on the conditions on the Colorado River and that are placing stresses on our system. Based upon tree ring data, we are facing the driest conditions in at least 1,200 years. The Colorado River's major reservoirs continue to be at low levels, and in August of last year, the Federal Bureau of Reclamation declared a shortage for calendar year 24, which represents the 3rd year of an ongoing annual shortages on the Colorado River system. Understanding that situation could be extreme and stressful in the future, in June of 22, the city opened its drought management plan as I declared a stage 1 water alert. A stage 1 water alert occurs when an insufficient supply situation has not occurred, but appears likely. And if conditions do not improve, it's likely that we will need to move further on in the later stages of our drought management plan. We remained at stage 1 water alert at this time. With that sort of background, I would hand it over to Dr. Max Wilson, our Deputy Director overseeing our Water Resources and Planning Division.
Thank you, Director Hayes. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, late last year, as Deputy City Manager Stevenson mentioned earlier, City Council adopted the Sustainable Desert City Development Policy. Today, we'll be updating you on the 3rd leg of that stool, the portion concerning large water users. The Sustainable Desert City Development Policy in particular instructed staff to develop a new ordinance placing new conservation requirements on the city's largest water users. The policy, as outlined in the Sustainable Desert City Development Policy, was quite specific as to what these requirements should be, and this ordinance that we are bringing before you today is a reflection of those instructions to staff. We will now discuss some of these requirements in detail. At its core, the Large Water User Ordinance creates 2 new customer categories among Water Services Department customers: those who use 250,000 gallons per day or greater, and those that use 500,000 gallons of water per day or greater. New water users that fall into either of these categories will be required to submit and obtain Water Services Department approval of a water conservation plan before construction. Additionally, new water users who are projected to use more than 500,000 gallons per day will be required to reduce their water use by 30% through conservation or recycling measures that fit within the, and additionally fit within the city's existing water resource portfolio. In response to feedback from stakeholders, we have added an element that allows the Water Services Director the flexibility in implementing this 30% conservation or recycling requirement in instances where a project brings significant economic benefits to the city. Importantly, the activities that save water in the existing zoning ordinance or city codes will not be counted towards this conservation goal. This is an important clarification because existing land use policies and development codes already require significant amounts of water conservation. Rather, the Sustainable Water Service application that we'll discuss momentarily will quantify the extent to which potential large water users go above and beyond existing city codes and standards. Examples of methods for going above and beyond include using appliances or fixtures that are more efficient than those currently required, advanced treatment of wet cooling systems to reduce water loss, utilization of green infrastructure where it otherwise would not be required, or water recycling. Water conservation plans will be submitted as a Sustainable Water Service application to the Water Services Department. These documents will include basic information about what is planned in the development and the benefits of water conservation and recycling actions on site. Sustainable Water Services applications will be reviewed by the Water Services Department within the Water Conservation team and eventually be approved or denied by the Water Services Director. And finally, we'd like to discuss how this project will be implemented and where it will be implemented within the city. Because sustainable water use is needed throughout the city, not just in specific portions, this ordinance is written to apply citywide, and additionally, it is written to be enforced by the Water Services Department as part of our normal development process. And with that, staff recommends that the TIP subcommittee recommends to City Council approval of an ordinance amending Phoenix City Code, Chapter 37, Article 3, Division 1 and Division 2 for large water users. I'll turn it over to any questions we have.
Just very quickly, could you explain how you reached out to our large water users? What kind of discussions did you have with them?
Sure, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We did have a stakeholder meeting with folks in the development community that represent some of these large water users like GPEC, Valley Partnership, the Tech Council. We also had some specific outreach to entities like TSMC to gauge some concerns about this proposed ordinance, and we had feedback back. There was just questions. There were no real concerns about it. It was just more questions of how will it be implemented, those types of questions. We didn't have anyone that was opposed to it.
Good. I just wanted to make sure that we did the outreach and we did it thoroughly, so I appreciate that. Councilwoman Pastor, did you have a question?
Yeah. You can go to slide 5. Slide 5 right there. This is the population and the residential water consumption, and it says to 2021. Where are we today in population in 2024? And I'm making a big assumption that, and I'm probably correct, that the population is higher than this 2021, which means consumption is a little bit higher. So where I would like numbers or data of today, so then I can work with those numbers. And I'm sure I know what the answer is that we go by a certain data point and this is how they collect it, and I understand that. But there's other ways of getting today's population and consumption. So I'm fine with that. I'm sure that's what you're going to tell me, Troy. I'll put it on the record. Go ahead.
Sure, Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor. Yeah, the updated numbers for 2024, actually what we've seen is the population is around 1.7 million, I think. And then our per person, per capita per day, water use has continued to drop. We are now below the 100 gallons per capita per day, but we can get you an updated chart.
Yeah, I think it's just for the dialogue and conversation. But going to that chart, I would like to know what measurement you are using to let us know when it's unsustainable. So what data,
as it relates to the
at what
water
point would we
portfolio?
know that Phoenix has outgrown or is beyond growth where we don't have water?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, so essentially what we do in our planning process is we take the supply side, so all of the water resources that we have in our portfolio, and apply that on an annual basis. We then put the demand side of what we are projecting out for the build out of the city as we progress through time over the next 50 or 70 years or so. And we ensure in that planning process that the supply side is more than adequate to be able to match the demand side. What has been challenging in this is the reliability of the Colorado River system, right? And so when you put the Colorado River system and the amount of water resources that we have associated with that, we've had to recently make some assumptions of what is actually physically there versus not as we go out and we do those future projections.
Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to, in my head, rephrase the question. What is the population? At what point do we reach a certain population? So what's that population number that then we know it's unsustainable to continue to grow?
Madam Chair, Councilman Pastor, what I would say is it's not necessarily population driven. It's more of water demand or water usage. Because as what we were talking today in the large water user, we're not necessarily adding population, but we're adding water use. And so with that, we can get you some updated charts that we have, graphs that show that water demand going out into the future in accordance with our water supplies.
Okay, so then I'll reverse my question. What is the number, or what do you use to measure the water demand to know when we no longer are capable or have the ability or we have the demand or the water? At what, I want to know what that number is.
Yeah, we can get that. It's growing over time. So that number, what we can do is get you the build out number.
Okay.
I just don't have it in front of me today.
And I think it's important for the public to know that. And the reason why I'm saying this and why I'm pushing is because we, as council people, have to understand that, because we're out recruiting for companies to come to our state. But I also want to be conscious or be able to say, we have enough for those that have already been here and will continue to have the water as we recruit. So that's where my mindset is, because you have to balance both.
Yep, no. And that is a very good point, and that is, I think, the spirit of this ordinance, to make sure that we are mindful as we grow of how we're doing it. And it goes back to the sustainable desert city policies that were adopted by City Council. It's putting all of that into perspective, that as we move forward, water has to be mindful, is what you're pointing out, of how we're doing things and why we're doing it. And I can get you those numbers.
Okay, and then I have another question for items, slide 6. I received a different flyer. Maybe it's not slide 9, I think it is. Yes, I received a different flyer that I used and had a lot of questions. It says water conservation plan submittal and approval. What is considered effective use? That was on the flyer that I had. And then when you say approval, what are the guidelines for approval? And who determines that? I know we passed something, but now I'm getting into the weeds of everything, Because that's really, we pass broad stuff, and then it's you, it's staff that then determines the weeds.
So I can do it broadly, and then Max can pick up the pieces. Vice Mayor, Councilman Pastor. So essentially what we're asking water users to do that are greater than 250,000 gallons a day is to put together a water conservation plan. And so how they're going to be using water, and in their industry or in their manufacturing or whatever this request is, how they're taking water conservation into consideration, how they're doing that. And then they're submitting those based upon what industry norms are to ensure that they're doing more. And some of the examples that we've had is cooling towers. You can implement dry cooling, you can implement wet cooling, you can implement wet cooling with enhanced technologies that are reducing their water usage, that's showing an overall lower water footprint. We're then analyzing that water use or that request versus, as you were pointing out earlier, the water demands or the water supply projections that we have to make sure that it fits within our portfolios and it's not going to be adding stress to our systems. Doing that macro kind of analysis of if we take this customer on, are we going to be able to have the resources for them for the future? Because we take very seriously all of our customers as we bring them on as customers, residential or businesses, that once they're our customers, we need to make sure that they have water and the water resources that we need for their future.
The only other thing I would add to, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, that one of the challenges in dealing with water use of this magnitude is that these are relatively rare circumstances. We don't have water users of 250,000 gallons per day come in the door very often. And as such, they tend to be highly specialized water users who have incredibly detailed water plans of themselves. And so what we want to do is have this collaborative conversation with them about how they're planning to use water, how they're planning to use it more efficiently, so rather than trying to put them into a box where we say, you have to fill out this exact plan with these exact subcomponents and all of these pieces, because ultimately that might not fit the goals and the types of use that specific entity is able to use. Additionally, on your specific question about effective versus efficient, I don't have the flyer in front of me. It sounds to me like that may be a typo. It seems like we would want to say efficient in that case.
I probably did. What I tore that flyer apart. So, and that's what it said something, and then that's when I wrote, what is considered effective then? Or if it's efficient, how do we know that?
Yeah.
Like how do you measure these things? And I'm getting into the weeds, but we can have a conversation offline. But the other piece is what if I come in, I give you a water usage plan, I get okay, but then I go off my plan. What happens?
Yeah, so essentially what we're going to be doing is monitoring these permits on an annual basis. One of the provisions in there is they can't be with over their estimated usage by over 20%. So we'll be monitoring them on an annual basis. If their usage is more than what they were projecting in their permit, we would then bring them back in and then enter into those discussions.
I know, but I've been here, I've done this rodeo before. So this is great. However, what happens when they're past their water usage? It's one thing to say, oh, we can have a conversation. Their business is already here. So what happens? Do we have to implement a fine? Do we have to, because I want to make sure what we're doing and what we're passing is solid so that we don't have to come back or where we're in a situation and then we're told, well, we can't do that. These are guidelines. So,
Vice Mayor, Councilman Pastor, yes, and so we took that in consideration, and so as part of the ordinance, there are financial fines that could be levied if they are put back into compliance after a certain amount of time.
Madam Chair, Councilman Pastor, the way the ordinance is set up is that first year that they're over, we would then, over that 20%, we'd be asking them, is that a one-year anomaly for something, or is that what you're going to be operating at, in which case you need to look at revising your plan, have that discussion, as Troy said. If they don't do that, then we would be moving to, a fine system, as Troy outlined, where there's a gradient scale that goes up if they continue to avoid that, to make it a very costly item for them not to respond.
I'm just asking because if they go beyond that, there should be a fine, period.
There is.
Where there is no back and forth, change your plan, it's anomaly. Flat line, we will not get the water back. So that's why I'm behaving the way I'm behaving, because water is one thing we can't get back, just like time. So I want to make sure that this is very solid, because it kind of reminds me, and I've been here around, I've experienced it, and then I'm told we can't really do anything, our hands are tied. So that's why I'm trying to figure this out. My next question is, why is it meets at least 30%? It says at least, why can't we go higher?
It could be that what we got that benchmark from is our interactions with the Taiwan Semiconductor company, since it is one of our large users. And so us benchmarking off of them, of what they've done when they first came in versus what they have now, we think that's an achievable level. But it could be higher if that's what the council deems to be. That's where that number came from.
And importantly, Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, the way that we've written these conservation plans into the ordinance is that they are for going above and beyond existing city requirements. So as city requirements continue to get more stringent over time, they will need to come in and find additional ways to save water. So we're hoping that as we continue through code modifications and code updates moving forward, this is something that this policy or this ordinance will continue to live and grow.
Okay, because my understanding is there are companies that are already grandfathered in. These are for companies that are coming in now, but there are some companies and establishments that are already grandfathered in, which leads to my next question. If they're grandfathered in and they do expansion, then do they have to come in and start from that space?
Right, Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, yes. So that's where they would be picked up into this policy. If there's an expansion or an increase in their water uses, they would have to come back in through the planning process. Then that's when they would get picked up in this ordinance.
Okay, because I think of Mayo, I think of ASU, where there's future expansion plans, which then would cause more water usage. So that's what I'm thinking. And my last question is, economic benefits may be considered in meeting the 30% requirement. What does that mean?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, what that language allows for is some flexibility as determined by the Water Services Director, because that's the position that's ultimately responsible within the city to monitor our water service and ensure exactly what you were asking at the beginning, of making sure we're not going after something that is brand new when we want, but impacts our existing ability to serve residents and water users. And so that allows for the Water Services Director, in consultation with the Economic Development Department, the Mayor and Council, and Planning and Development Department, to look at saying, okay, there are some really great jobs that are coming out of this proposed use or other economic benefits, and maybe they can only get to 25% instead of 30% water. But within their industry, they're doing everything they can to recycle and conserve water, and so then the director has that flexibility to say it's okay to do the 25% in that particular instance.
I'll sit on that one. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to say, again, I agree with Councilman Pastor that water is a precious and finite commodity, and we need to make sure that we're using it in a manner that is beneficial to all residents of Phoenix. So thank you for ensuring that, as well as the way that our residential users we've incentivized them to reduce waste and have more prudent consumption, that we are trying to do those for our larger users. My question piggybacks a little bit off about those existing large water users that are currently, as the way I understand this, they don't necessarily have any incentive at this juncture to submit a plan that would meet these qualifications. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about what are our plans to incentivize them to practice more efficient water usage.
Vice Mayor and Councilman Hodge Washington. So essentially what we're doing now is we have a group that's set aside for larger users, which have been focusing on HOAs and users like this, that they're going out and giving that contact and having that dialogue with them on an informal basis is kind of how we're addressing that. There really isn't a mechanism in the city to go and have those discussions other than an informal basis. I think what we've heard for a lot of these, it's receptive. For businesses wanting to reduce their water usage, it would be reducing their bottom line, and in investments and encouraging them to look at how they're using water. I think what we've gotten back from them is there's those positives. We also have groups like the Blue Bank, in which this council supported as well, of nonprofit organizations that would help them do investments or loans to be able to change out technologies to be able to use reduced water flows that would allow that as well. It's kind of the mechanisms that we're using now. We also have currently out on the street for the commercial, industrial, and other ones is the turf rebate programs and the toilet rebate programs that those entities could utilize as well. But the amount of water that we're talking about, it's really the manufacturing side and the cooling side that we would be most interested in. But I don't know if Max wants to add anything else.
Yeah, Vice Mayor, Council Member Hodge Washington. One of the things that I think we have done thoughtfully as we've launched these new incentive programs for grass and for other projects like the Blue Bank is we've made coming in and getting that original efficiency checkup, which by and large is creating a plan much like this, a prerequisite to accessing those funds. So if you are a large water user in this category and you want to access any of our direct financial incentive programs, we're going to work with you to make a plan up front that would meet many of these requirements that we see here today before you're able to access those incentives. And we found that to be a very useful lever thus far in the conversation.
I appreciate that. I would just throw one more out there, that because not everyone would be willing to voluntarily make these changes. So similarly, the way we adjusted the water consumption for our residential users, we may want to consider a similar methodology for our large water users if they're not willing to make the voluntary adjustments. I also wanted to piggyback on Councilman Pastor's conversation about compliance. Monitoring is great, but if we have found that they're not in compliance, we definitely need to ensure that the fines are not just flat fines that they can necessarily factor into their bottom line. There should be some level of a sliding scale so that it does have an incentive to make the actual change that we want to see with this ordinance. And then my last comment would be on, do we have any metrics or goals that we hope that this ordinance would achieve? For example, is the goal that we would reduce the consumption or the use by our large water users by a certain percentage? If there isn't a stated goal such as that, I think that might be a helpful initiative for us to consider as well, so we have some benchmark in which to track success.
Vice Mayor, Councilman Hodge Washington. So we don't necessarily have one designated for large water users. This ordinance was necessarily focused on going forward, and so it's perceiving or reducing potential usage, and so that's where the goal of the 30% was kind of established, of reducing their potential usage by 30% as they come in.
I understand that. I'm gently recommending that we look to our current large water users and come up with an established goal or metrics that we can look at and see as a council that this is a goal, and here we are. This is where we stand towards that goal. I think it would be helpful because we have told the residents of Phoenix that you need to make adjustments, and I think it should apply to all residents, not just all members doing business in your Phoenix as well. So.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Hodge Washington, we will look to see what we can come up with for the full council, so we can come with a goal for that and bring that forward. I would like to just point out for the record, the language in the proposed ordinance as it relates to fines for violation of the ordinance. The first fine would be 200% of the charges for water used. Again, these are very large, 250,000 and above, 500,000, it's expensive. So that's the first step. Then the second grading will be 500%. Then the third one is 1,000%. And then the fourth one would be 2,000% of the charges for water. So it's getting very, very expensive for them to ignore us if they're out of compliance with what they're proposed. It's not something that is more like our typical fines that someone could just build into, a process and say that is, something they could do as part of normal business operation. But that's what we have built into the proposed ordinance today.
So I want to make sure I have it correctly. It's 200, 500%, 1,000, and 2,000% of the
charges for water used.
For water use on a monthly basis, or is it like when would just trying to get an idea of how the fine would apply? Is it is it for the 200%, is it 2 times that one month's water bill, or is it 2 times the yearly water bill?
It would be based upon their yearly water bill, right? Because it's based upon years of them not being in compliance, and so that's where the large amount would come from in terms of their cost.
That's helpful. Thank you so much for that clarification.
Washington, because the ordinance is built on an annual basis and an annual review, that's how that evaluation will be done, is on an annual basis.
Thank you. That's helpful. I just want to make sure that everyone understands how it would work. So thank you. That's it for me. Thank you, Chair.
I want to follow up on a conversation that Councilwoman Hodge Washington stated. We had a huge dialogue regarding current users. And I need to go back and look at that dialogue. But there were several of us that said we wanted the current users to get basically the same conversation. I can't remember why we didn't do it. Someone let me know why we don't let our current large users know that this is what we're doing and that they need to get in compliance.
Vice Mayor, Councilman Pastor. So essentially, at the time, the discussion was that there wasn't a mechanism in place to be able to go and address existing users. And so in place of that, that's where we would have our staff go out and make the informal contacts with them to see if we could get them into compliance. But that is something that we could look at, as Councilwoman Hodge Washington has pointed out, of mechanisms to do that for existing customers. It's something we could look at.
And you'll look at that before it comes to council?
Have that discussion, yeah.
Are there any other comments? Okay, Councilwoman O'Brien.
Thank you, Chairwoman. When you provide us the additional information, Troy, could you please provide us approximately, and I realize it would depend on whether they're using 250,000 or 500,000, what those financial fines might equate, right? If I knew all the numbers, I could do the math, but if you could give me some of that, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
That's all, Chair.
I'm also interested in pursuing and looking at some type of incentive program for these large users, much like we have done for residential. I think what we've done with the HOAs has been very encouraging. I know my HOA took advantage of it. Thank you very much. And so maybe in the future we can have a discussion about more incentives and maybe even discuss what might be out there in the horizon with regards to applications and building codes that are changing to address the issue of water conservation. I think that might be a great topic for the future. Any other comments? Then can I have a motion?
To approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. It carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And now we will turn to call to the public. Our first speaker, Jerry Van Guest.
I'm here for my monthly update. I have a handout as usual, and for the council members and for the Parks Director. First of all, it was last April we came to this meeting and presented the members a blight complaint on Papago Park, which has been addressed finally. But at the same time, we're very thankful that it's been cleaned up, and you can actually see what the lagoons and everything were intended to look like. But it's also exposed the infrastructure, and the infrastructure is pathetic. It's embarrassing to Phoenix. The restrooms, there is not one restroom at Papago Park that is American with Disability compliant. It's not compliant. And it's not being addressed. We're not going to stop with having deferred maintenance, which cleaning out those ponds was. 3 decades of no maintenance on those ponds. We want the other issues now, the infrastructure, a total renovation of that park like we've done at Camelback, Piestewa, Dreamy Draw, and we're doing it at North Mountain now. We had last spring, big fanfare, patting on the back, building a new handicap accessible fishing dock. Well, guess what? Those handicap people that use the fishing dock, there's no restroom there for them to use. I don't know how that slides by management because that's pathetic. Everybody knows, that act was enacted back in 1990. Those restrooms are derelict. They're the shelters for the homeless. We need to upgrade it and be proud of what we have there, because right now it's unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Eric Nielsen.
Hi. Hello, testing. Okay, yep. Hi, my name is Eric, and I actually made a mistake. I thought this was the other committee for the affordable housing, so I actually had an idea for that, which is I think the city of Phoenix should look at expanding the Job Corps program, because I think housing first is a good idea, but the wraparound services are what makes it really work for people. I think Job Corps is kind of an old, decrepit, original version of that. So I just would like to see Job Corps expanded. I know it's a federal program, but I bet if we built another one next to it, just south of Lincoln, they would be happy to help run it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Leslie Shepard.
Hello again. I just want to, the gentlemen or the people that were sitting up here regarding the airport, I just want to let you guys know my experience in coming here is that I've heard multiple times people from the airport talking about how bad it is and they don't get their money. And so it was disappointing to me to hear them talk about how they're self-sufficient, how they make their own money, how it's not coming out of our pocket. And it's like, but yet your employees come down here and talk about how you don't pay them. So I'm going to ask you guys to please, I don't know if you can reconsider you guys passing that last one, but to me, there's holes all in that project. I appreciate, it's Washington, is it Hodge Washington?
Hodge Washington.
Okay, Hodge Washington. I appreciated what you said about, there is more to see it, that, people come here as well, which brings income. So I see all that. But to me, when we're when we're letting somebody expand who's not taking care of those within, that's a concern too. You know, because you've seen it. I've been here. I know you're here. Multiple times we have people come down here from the airport that they are not getting their income, they're not getting promoted, all these different positions, all these different situations that are going on. And these people, I don't know if they're still here. I didn't memorize who they were, but it doesn't make any sense that they're sitting here saying, yeah, but we want to bring more business in. Well, why don't you take care of your employees? Let's start with that. The next thing is, it really is a heart-burning situation for me about the homeless situation. I know they've been shifted around and moved. I know that a lot of them have come back. They really need porta potties. You know, they can't get into places to use the restroom. People don't want them there. I mean, can you imagine if you had to find a bush or something to go behind if you were a female that living on the street? So I'm appealing more for the homeless also right now. I know that's not necessarily a topic on the agenda, but it's just it breaks my heart. It's not too far from here. I know that they've cleaned it up a bit, but I'm telling you, there's not a single porta potty out there for them, and there should be a porta potty. If we're passing all these agenda items that are exorbitant amount, and I just want to let you all know, I was very impressed with your questions. I appreciated your pushback regarding the water. Unfortunately, you guys passed it though, so I was a little confused on that, because to me, until they come back with those things tightened up, I wouldn't be approving them either, because you don't know that they will. You guys have so many things. When you said, I don't know why we didn't pass that last time, or why we didn't tell the big water users. I'm not looking down on you for that. You got a bunch of stuff on your plate. That's why when you guys pass stuff that isn't got the T's crossed and the I's dotted, it's a concern, because we don't know that they are going to do that. But now it's passed. So my big appeal to you also is anything that's associated with the World Economic Forum. I know you might be friends with Kate. I don't care if you are, if you're not friends with her. I'm asking you to check into the fact that she's on that mag, and that is against we the people. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Tom Arnold?
Hi, I'm new to this, so please forgive my ignorance. But what Leslie just said about, I was listening, and there were questions that you had, and they'll say, we'll get back with you. Did they get back with you to your satisfaction? Because I didn't hear it. And as Leslie said, even though you had questions that I didn't hear an answer for, it was passed unanimously. You have the ability to unpass it if the answers don't come back that you had asked, and they didn't. Maybe they gave you the answers, but I certainly didn't hear them. Did you all get your questions answered the way that you had hoped? No, I'm asking, please.
We cannot respond to call to the public, but staff can maybe talk to you afterwards.
All right. Well, again, if they don't come back with the answers that you asked that I didn't hear a reply to, do you have the ability to unpass what is already passed? I don't know. I hope.
Mario.
I have a question too. Because this is legally, I mean, it's a process question. Can legal or Mario respond to this question because it is process?
Can I ask Mario? I have a question, or I don't know, legal. I have a question towards staff. Can I do it?
Yes, if you have a question.
Mario, my understanding is that what was passed today will go to council. In between today and council, we have the ability to get all our answers, our questions answered, and also be able then to refine what is in that ordinance.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, members of the subcommittee, that's exactly right. What was passed today was a recommendation to the full city council. but there is going to be time to get those questions that you've asked answered. Because staff didn't have the information on hand, they will get that information for you in between today and when this comes to the full council. And when it goes to the full council is when you can be assured that your questions are answered before making that final approval.
And then I have the ability, or all of us have the ability at full council, if the ordinance is not correct or the information is not what we asked for or is not part of what the recommendation is, then I have the ability to vote no on that item.
That's absolutely right.
Okay. And then on that item that day, depending on what the motion is, we could add pieces that were not answered, or due to the motion maker, be able then to add on to that motion and give that directive to the staff to make sure it's embedded in there.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one more question? What I'm understanding is there is the ability within policy to reverse what you've already passed?
Again, we can't violate and have a dialogue with you and call to the public. I would recommend you talk to staff right after the meeting so they can explain the process to you.
Madam Chair, I can answer the question on behalf of the Law Department. So what the subcommittee has passed is a recommendation for full City Council approval. They cannot undo the recommendation, but what's been stated on the record is that the Council has the ability to consider the ordinance in its entirety and make any changes when it comes before the full City Council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm very cautious about call to the public, as often as our public meetings tend to get before the Attorney General, but thank you if you have the ability to answer. The next speaker, Roger Lindquist. Has he left? We'll give him 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, okay. I'm right on 10. Go ahead.
Bear with me. This is my maiden voyage at this podium, so I've never done this before, but my name is Roger Lindquist. I'm in Legislative District 12 out in Ahwatukee. And I just had a quick thought in the conversation about the water usage. I'm kind of a data guy, and I love some of the stuff that you brought up. And I think as a family of 2 now, but I used to be a family of 4 in the same house, I don't know what metrics they're using to measure usage. Because if you measure it by the household versus number of people in the household, I married a gal who's 1 of 12, and I've got a father-in-law who's 1 of 12 and a mother-in-law who's also 1 of 12. So in that case, there's a pretty dramatic, difference, how much water goes into 12 kids and 2 parents in one house. So that's all I wanted to point out. But you guys all brought up really good things about the metrics, and you got to be making sure math is cut and dried. Some people think it's different for some, but I mean, math is just math. You got to make sure you use the right stuff. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker, James Gordon.
Good morning. My name is James Gordon, and I live out in Goodyear, Arizona. And I'm with a group of people who are trying to get all that airplane noise every day reduced over our community. I have a speech, but I wasn't planning to talk today. I wanted to listen to this committee and see how you talk through issues. And you seem like you're very on point, and you do take comments and act on them. Everybody's hands seem to be tied. We've gone to the city council, we've gone to the Phoenix City Council, we've gone to the aviation board, and we haven't had any success. Every morning, 2 minutes apart, these loud Piper airplanes are over our homes, over our community. We had a sort of gentleman's agreement, if you will, that they wouldn't fly south of the 10, north of the 10, but they violate that all the time. And I know you've seen our little gig on ABC where they came and talked to us last week. And as you know, also a week ago, one of those airplanes leaving Glendale Airport crash landed in a community. I don't know if you've had a chance to go over to the Hispanic community, but they're devastated over there. They lost their transportation to work. One lady had to go to the emergency room because nobody cleaned up all the gasoline. In fact, a little chuckle to that is when I went by there to talk to those folks, there was a black cat sitting on top of the sand, said, "Wow, I've got a new kitty litter here." So luckily nobody got hurt, but people are devastated. They want out of that community, and they would like to have something happen that would either slow down the amount of traffic in that area, and we look at it on the radar tracker all the time, and we can see the number of planes going in and out of there. Or is there a possibility that, we could have a regulation to where maybe it's a Class C airspace where people have to at least fly those airplanes at a higher altitude so that that plane that, crash landed, if it was at 1,200 feet before it hit that 10,000-foot runway. You can land a jet on those runways. It would have plenty of space to land and not, cause all that havoc in that community, nor would it have caused all the havoc that we have in terms of noise. I haven't touched on the issue around the, 100% gas and stuff like that they're dropping, particles on our schools and stuff like that, but that's for another day. But I did want you to know that we are continuing to go to all these meetings and ask you to please help us out. That school can certainly shorten that, their schedules down there and not have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 airplanes in a pattern and using our community as a practice field. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. That concludes the speakers. Next item, future agenda items. Do we have any requests? All right, then we stand adjourned. Thank you.
So everything I've learned has been on the job. You see something new every day, and you learn every day. I knew that